The sky above the forgotten husk of Virex 9 didn't just loom, it weighed down on everything beneath it like a suffocating sheet of lead. A heavy, lifeless gray blanketed the horizon, without even the courtesy of a sunbeam or a star to break. The monotony. There was no day, no night, just a smear of smog the color of despair, lit from beneath by the chemical fires that smoldered across the broken landscape like the last bitter remnants of a war nobody won. The clouds above weren't clouds at all, just decaying plumes of corrosive exhaust stitched together by decades of neglect. Rain fell intermittently, but not in any way nature ever intended. The droplets that slid from the sky were tinged yellow, sluggish, acidic. They chewed through exposed metal, pitted the ground like shrapnel, and hissed against the fractured remains of the world. That rain didn't nourish it, destroyed. And still, a lone figure moved through that rot-born tempest. Not quickly, not with purpose, but with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who had nothing left to run from or toward. Caleb Voss didn't make sound anymore when he walked, not by accident, not by stealth. It was habit, muscle memory, a holdover from years of slipping between death and duty. His breath masked his quietly with every inhale, the filters inside it struggling to scrub the air of toxins before they scoured his lungs. The visor on his helmet glowed with faint green overlays. Radiation levels were low today, at least compared to the usual. Chemical spikes, mild. Terrain mapping, passable. It was the closest Virex 9 ever came to saying good weather. The wind, thick with ash, dragged across the pitted surface of the world like it was trying to erase what little detail remained. Sheets of black dust skated over the ground, stinging the exposed slivers of Caleb's skin where his patchwork suit couldn't quite cover. He barely noticed. He wasn't out on a mission. Not anymore. Those days were over, signed and sealed and buried with the rest of his former squad under anonymous headstones on planets no one bothered charting. Once, long ago, or maybe not long at all, depending how he counted the time he'd been an Alliance recon scout. That title used to mean something. First in, last out, rapid insertion, crash site extraction, deep zone evac, hazard world recovery. He'd flown into burning skies on half-dead ships, crawled through collapsed bunkers to pull out intel or bodies or both. He'd come close to death more times than he could recall, and even closer once, when his spine had fractured during a failed evac on Atros. He'd survived that, barely, and the Alliance had rewarded him the way all big machines reward broken cogs. They patched him up enough to move, enough to discharge, and then sent him a letter that said thanks and goodbye. No pension, no follow-up, no calls. So he bought silence. Not peace, just the absence of noise. Virex 9 was perfect for that. Once, a weapons testing ground, then a front line during the Consolidation War, and finally a forgotten graveyard of tech and tragedy. No one came here, no one left. The war had moved on, but the land never recovered. Chemical seep had ruined the atmosphere. Radiation still laced the soil. The only living things here were mold, mutant moss, and whatever vermin evolved to eat. Metal scraps and battery acid, which made it just right for Caleb. He lived in a derelict dome hangar half buried in the side of a collapsed ridge. Inside, he salvaged what he could: circuit boards, power cells, old comms gear. He fixed what no one wanted, sold it to the few smugglers and off-grid traders who still risked a pass through this planetary wasteland. He liked it that way. He didn't have to talk, didn't have to feel. Until today, his scanner chirped soft but sharp enough to cut through the wind. He paused on a high ridge of cracked obsidian and steel, the signal flickering in his HUD like a heartbeat. South quadrant. Unregistered beacon. A flare had gone up minutes earlier, faint, but visible if you were close and looking. Caleb had noticed it by accident. His first thought, not military, no Alliance code. Civilian? Doubtful. Smuggler? More likely. It was the kind of signal that whispered desperation, not protocol. He should have ignored it. People crashed here all the time, sometimes from orbit, sometimes not by accident. Plenty of ships went missing in dead zones like this. Some fell out of the sky from bad nav, some were shot down for cargo, and others were simply abandoned with the crew still screaming inside. A lot of ghosts out here. You didn't get involved unless you wanted to become one, but something in him stirred, a twitch in the nerve, instinct. Training that refused to die. Caleb rerouted without thinking, reran the scan with a tighter loop, and set off down the ridge. 50 minutes later, he stood at the edge of a crash crater the size of a cargo truck. A single escape pod lay there buried nose down in the ridge wall, the hull bent and cracked from impact. Steam hissed from the ruptured vent ports at the rear, and the stabilization wing on one side was completely severed. The ground around it still smoked. An old emergency beacon blinked red, once every few seconds, erratic and pulsing like a failing heart. Caleb drew his sidearm automatically, habit more than concern, and approached from an angle, boots crunching. Through acid-eaten shale and broken composite, the pod's hull was warped, plating peeled back like paper. He climbed the slope, gripping a handhold welded flat from heat and force, and pried the outer hatch loose. Inside, it smelled like death and pain. The interior was wreckage, buckled harnesses, shredded panels, flickering readouts. One screen still blinked, warning diagnostics in four languages. Blood had soaked into the crash foam along the left bulkhead. The scent of cooked insulation, scorched flesh, and melting polymer hung thick. Then movement, barely perceptible. A twitch in the shadows near the far wall. He stepped in slowly, eyes narrowing behind his visor. A figure slumped against the emergency bulkhead, humanoid, but barely. Her skin shimmered with a dull silver sheen, the color of worn chrome, and patches of it glowed faintly where bioluminescence still clung to life. But the glow was flickering, fading. Her body was a ruin of trauma burns, acid scars, torn fabric, fused into skin. Blood seeped from her side, staining the crash foam black beneath her. Her hair, white, jagged, uneven, was glued to her forehead with sweat and blood. She tried to lift her head, couldn't. Her eyes opened instead. They were violet, deep, slitted, reflective. Alien. Don't look at me, she rasped. Her voice cracked and caught like a broken speaker. Weak, defiant. Caleb said nothing. His visor swept over her vitals, erratic, failing. He stepped forward anyway, placing one foot carefully beside a sparking conduit, and leaned down to check her pulse. Faint, spiking. She was seconds away from dying. Her armor, what was left of it, was high grade, worn down and fused into her body at several points, suggesting heat, force, or both. The markings on her collar were half melted, but enough remained for him to recognize the origin. Valari. Or close enough to count. Half Valari, maybe. A hybrid. That was bad. Hybrids didn't ride in civilian pods. They didn't crash like this unless someone wanted them dead. They weren't tourists or refugees. They were assets, weapons. He knew the rumors. Everyone did. During the last war, the Valari Consortium had created infiltration operatives, bioengineered half-breeds bred for seduction, espionage, and elimination. Designed to infiltrate enemy ranks, manipulate targets, dismantle leadership from the inside. Most had vanished after the ceasefire. Some said they'd been wiped out. Others whispered they'd gone into hiding or worse, been hunted by their own creators. None were supposed to be here. Caleb hesitated. Every part of him told him to walk away, to close the hatch, let the pod sink into the ash like so many others. But she was alive, barely, and something in her eyes, not fear, not anger, just weariness, not begging, not even hope, just the dull acceptance of someone who had expected to die and been denied the dignity of it. He moved without another word, slid his arms under her broken frame, careful where he gripped, avoiding the burns, the fused plates. Her breath hitched in pain. You should have left me, she whispered. They all do. But she didn't fight. He carried her into the storm. The dome hanger groaned like a dying creature as Caleb pushed through the entry lock, the storm at his heels. The reinforced plating of the shelter flexed under the weight of the weather acid wind, pressurized gusts, and the low-frequency hum of a world still bleeding from the wars that had tried to erase it. He moved fast through the antechamber, the pressure seals hissing shut behind him as the filtration system kicked on. A cascade of mechanical clanks echoed overhead as ancient turbines stirred awake, dragging poison air through scrubbers that hadn't been serviced in years. The air tasted like recycled copper and stale oxygen, but it was breathable, safer. Then outside, in his arms, the hybrid woman stirred, not conscious, just reflexive movement. Her body, light as it was, felt unnaturally cold, like she was already halfway gone. He laid her gently on the old medbed, which let out a creak of protest, the hydraulics beneath its platform sputtering before catching hold. The interface flickered. Dim yellow light spilled over her broken frame as Caleb activated the surgical array. He moved with practiced hands, fluid, detached, but not emotionless. Muscle memory took over. He removed what was left of her armor, piece by twisted piece, careful not to tear open the places where metal had fused with flesh. Some parts of her skin had been scorched down to the dermal core, leaving a matrix of pale tissue woven with hybridized carbon fiber. Her blood wasn't fully red, tinged with something bluish and faintly luminous. He didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. On worse days. On worse planets. A neutralizing agent hissed from a spray canister as he flushed her wounds, dissolving the acid, foaming where it met tissue, seeping into the burns to stop the rot before it could spread. She shuddered once, involuntarily, but didn't wake. He patched the largest gashes with synth skin, sealed others with dermal gel and a microtorch. The room filled with the smell of polymer and sterilizer. Every hiss, every spark, every flicker of plasma light felt like an echo from a past he'd tried to bury, and still, questions gnawed at the edge of his mind. Who is she? Why here? Why now? Virex's 9 wasn't on any map worth trusting. There was no legitimate trade, no patrols, no refugee lanes. It was a ghost world, a warning to anyone who thought progress came without cost. And yet, someone had sent her here, or abandoned her. He looked down at her face. Even broken, she looked like something sculpted for both beauty and terror. High cheekbones, skin like silver glass, eyes closed but framed with the strange luminous flecks that marked Valari gene splice origin. Her muscles were dense but lean, balanced like a blade honed for both speed and precision. She'd been engineered for something very specific, but none of that mattered now. Now she was just a body on a table, bleeding into a recycled blanket, trying not to die. He wrapped her in thermal layers and administered a mild sedative to ease her convulsions. A whisper passed her lips, not in standard, not in any dialect he knew. It might have been a name, a memory, or maybe just the final ghost of a fading dream. Then silence, the kind that filled the whole room and stretched into your bones. He turned away and stood at the hangar's only window, a thick pane of reinforced glass clouded by grime and time. Outside, the storm howled like a feral animal. Wind lashed against the dome, dragging sheets of ash in swirling eddies. Lightning cracked somewhere far off, illuminating twisted wreckage in momentary flashes. His shoulder throbbed. Old injury, old life. He rubbed it without thinking. He didn't understand why he'd brought her back. It wasn't logic. It wasn't compassion. Not really. Something had flickered in her eyes. Something unspoken. Something he recognized. The look of someone who had long since accepted death, but still secretly, hopelessly, hadn't wanted to go alone. Not pity, recognition. He hadn't realized how much he missed that look. Morning came slowly. The storm outside less violent now but still pressing against the dome's integrity. Inside, it was still dark. The hangar's power grid functioned more by stubbornness than design. Caleb stood in what passed for a kitchen, really just a rusted shelf screwed into concrete, an old fusion burner, and a pair of cracked mugs. The scent of sterilizer still lingered from the night before, like a ghost refusing to leave. He sipped from a dented cup of rehydrated stimulant brew, bitter, sharp, awful, and watched her. She lay motionless beneath the thermal blanket, face half hidden behind a curtain of hair now scrubbed clean of blood but still matted from trauma. Her breathing was faint but stable. Her vitals, according to the medbed, had normalized. That didn't mean she was out of danger. It just meant death wasn't coming today. Not yet. He watched her like one might watch a flickering fire, hypnotic, unreadable, full of buried meaning. Something didn't add up. She'd been in a civilian pod. No weapons. No military transponder. No standard distress code. And yet her armor, what little had survived, was tactical grade. The muscle distribution on her limbs, the reflex twitch even in unconsciousness, the pattern of her injuries all screamed elite. But her escape had been sloppy, desperate, not planned. He pulled the transponder from the escape pod's wreckage and scanned it again. The encryption was layered but inconsistent, part black market, part something else. It didn't ping any cartel registry, no warlord symbols, no alliance records. Whatever this was, it wasn't smuggler tech. He glanced at her again. Maybe she hadn't escaped. Maybe she'd been discarded. The idea left a sour taste in his mouth. A soft cough broke the silence. Dry, strained, real. She stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, blinked against the low light, and then locked onto him. For a moment, she didn't move, just stared. Her expression was unreadable, exhausted, defensive, confused. He didn't move closer, Just crouched beside the wall, kept his voice even. Vitals are stabilizing, he said. You're on a safe patch of ground. For now. Her brow furrowed. She struggled to make sense of the room, then of him. You stayed, she said, half a question. Yeah, I'm not your problem. Too late for that. She breathed in slowly. It looked like it hurt. Her voice was ragged, but there was will behind it. You don't know what I am. He watched her. I've got a pretty good idea. No, she whispered. You really don't. She tried to sit up. Pain contorted her features. Her arms trembled as they braced beneath her, forcing her torso upward inch by inch. Caleb didn't stop her. If she wanted to move, it meant she still had fight. What's your name? He asked. Her lips cracked slightly. Tali and Sci, she said. Tali is fine. Caleb Voss, he replied. Her eyes scanned the interior of the hangar, exposed pipes, rusted conduits, patched wall seams, scavenged gear. Her assessment was quick, precise, strategic. This place is barely holding together. So am I. That got a reaction, a hint of a smirk. Barely there, but it was real. She shifted again and then froze. Her hand brushed the edge of the blanket. Beneath it, she was dressed in nothing but thermal wraps and medical gauze. Her face hardened, her posture straightened. Old instincts surged to the surface. Where's my gear? You didn't have any, Caleb said, voice steady. Just shattered armor fused to your side. I had to cut it loose. A tense silence. You didn't touch me, she said, not a question, but a challenge. Caleb met her gaze. If you mean anything beyond medical. No, she studied him for a long beat, judging, measuring. She found no deception. Slowly, she exhaled and leaned back. Her body relaxed slightly. You're not like most humans. Not anymore. She didn't press. Just stared at the ceiling, a strange silence growing between them. Then she said, I was on a covert transport. No military tags. Private contract. They were buyers. My pod launched when the ship took a hit in orbit. You were cargo? I was merchandise, she said bitterly. Until the deal went sideways. Caleb's jaw clenched. Valari hybrids aren't even supposed to exist anymore, he said slowly. Let alone travel off-world. They don't want us traveling, she replied. They want us gone. He nodded and rubbed a hand across his face. The air felt heavier. Whatever trouble she brought with her, it wasn't finished, and it was coming. The medbed's low hum filled the silence after she spoke, like the background noise of a war neither of them wanted to remember. Outside, the storm eased, but inside the hangar, tension thickened like fog settling over old wounds. Caleb didn't move right away. He stared at her, then turned toward the console by the wall. He pulled up atmospheric scans, nothing significant for now. The next pressure front was 20 hours off, maybe 22 if the winds held steady. That was their window. He glanced back toward the bed. You've got a day, he said quietly. Maybe two, if the signal trace fades fast. Tali didn't respond right away. Her eyes had drifted to the edge of the medbed, unfocused. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. You don't have to protect me. I know, Caleb said. You already did more than I expected. More than I deserved. He looked at her, really looked. The damage on her face, the healing cuts, the trauma beneath her skin. But her eyes still had depth. They hadn't dulled. No one deserves to be sold, he said. She let out a breath. Her eyes fluttered closed. I used to think that too. Caleb didn't reply. Instead, he moved to the far side of the hangar and began prepping the old recon sled. It had seen better days. Most of its systems were scavenged from dead transports and broken recon drones, but it worked. It would get them deep into the canyon farther underground, where satellite skins couldn't reach. If she could walk, they'd move before the next front hit. He checked the battery coils, toggled the shielding, and slid open the modular compartments. It felt good to work, to focus, to not think. Behind him, the hangar was quiet. Then came the sound of movement, light, controlled. He turned. Tali was sitting up, wrapped in the oversized thermal jacket he'd draped over her earlier. It hung from her frame like a tent, but she wore it like armor. Her shoulders were squared, her eyes sharp, alert. She wasn't healed, but she was alive. Her gaze swept the room again, this time slower, calculating. The way a soldier might assess a battlefield, not searching for threats, searching for exits. Her biology, Caleb knew, was different, engineered. Her body would mend faster than a human's. Her scars would fade eventually, But that wasn't what struck him. What struck him was the way she moved, as if she couldn't quite believe she was still moving at all. He saw it in her eyes. That flicker of hesitation. The echo of survival instinct without purpose. He recognized that too. He dropped a hydration packet on the bench beside her. She glanced at it, then at him. No thanks, no nod, just a quiet pause. Then she spoke. You could have sold me. I could have, Caleb said, checking the sled's nav system. Council would have paid. So would the ones who put you on that ship. She stared at him. So why didn't you? He didn't look up. You think I brought you here because I'm some good man? She didn't answer. He leaned against the wall. His voice was lower now, not angry, just tired. I'm not good. Not anymore. She tilted her head slightly, one eye narrowing. Then why help me? He hesitated. The answer felt too big, too old, too close to bone. Because I've seen too many people left behind, he said. Too many who could have been saved if someone had just done something. Tali's gaze softened. She looked away. You didn't ask what I did, she said after a long pause. No, why not? Because it doesn't matter. She raised an eyebrow. Doesn't matter? Someone put you in a cage, he said. That's all I needed to know. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I was stationed on our YT Hari 3 private contract. Black Ops. We were embedded near a rebel node. Intel said it was small. Routine operation. She drew in a breath that sounded like it hurt. We were the ones being hunted. It was a setup. A clean sweep ambush. They wiped out my unit. I got out, barely, but command flagged me. Said I was compromised. Marked defective. Her fingers touched her arm, tracing a scar like muscle memory. A deep ridge line that split a cluster of old implant nodes. That's when the buyers came. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't have to. It made sense now. The pod, the lack of a distress signal, the encrypted flare. She hadn't just been left behind, she'd been erased. Anyone else make it out? He asked. No, she didn't blink. I stopped hoping for that a long time ago. She looked at him. What about you? What landed you here? He ran a hand through his hair, grimacing like the question carried physical weight. Alliance. Recon. Drops. Recoveries. High-risk evac. She didn't interrupt. Spinal fracture on Atros, he continued. Last stop. They pulled me out, patched me enough to stand, then cut me loose. He laughed once. It wasn't a happy sound. I ended up here because I figured if I was already discarded, I might as well live somewhere that felt the same. Tali nodded slowly. Her expression changed. Not sympathy, not pity, just recognition. How long have you been alone? He smirked without humor. Long enough that talking to someone feels like breaking protocol. That got a laugh out of her. Quiet, dry, but real. He checked the sled again. We'll move before sundown, he said. There's an old relay bunker out east. Hidden, shielded. You'll be safer there. She moved to stand. Wobbly but determined. I can walk, she said. You ride, he replied. That's not a debate. She didn't argue, just followed his lead. They moved through the hangar like soldiers on a mission, packing gear, checking rations, sealing compartments. She took more initiative than he expected, falling into step with practiced calm. When she passed a reflective panel, she caught a glimpse of herself and stopped. Her face tightened. I don't look like I used to. Caleb turned toward her. You look like someone who's still standing. Half my body's synth wrap and scar tissue. You're not the first to carry damage out here, he said. You won't be the last. She stared at him, then turned without a word and headed to the sled. They left the hangar 2 hours before sunset. The recon sled kicked up waves of dust as its maglift engines glided them over the cracked terrain. Its sound was low, a soft whine, like a whisper on windless air. The sky above had darkened, not from nightfall but from the returning storm front. Crouched on the horizon like a predator waiting for a sign of weakness, ash rode the currents like phantom snow. Black, weightless, relentless. Caleb drove. His eyes flicked between the terrain scanner and the ridgelines. He knew this path, knew every dip and drop, every debris choke, every memory buried beneath the surface like a grave no one marked. Beside him, Tali sat rigid at first. Her hands gripped the rail bar, her knuckles pale where the skin wasn't burned. She said nothing, but her eyes never stopped moving left, right, forward, watching for shapes in the dust, silhouettes in the cloud banks. Her posture wasn't panic. It was habit. She was someone who had learned to survive by assuming attack was always 1 second away. They traveled in silence for over an hour. The sled cut through ravines carved by old artillery strikes and skidded over glass-smooth plains once scorched clean by orbital bombardment. Occasionally, they passed the skeletal remains of old walkers or downed gunships' rusting hulks twisted into grotesque silhouettes. Each ruin felt like a monument to a battle no one remembered. Then she finally spoke. If they track the pod, they'll come. Caleb didn't look at her. His hands remained steady on the controls. I know, they'll kill you too, just for being near me. He didn't flinch, didn't respond. That seemed to shake her more than if he had screamed. You're not even afraid, she said quietly. Caleb exhaled, slow, measured. I'm used to standing next to things that explode. She didn't reply, just turned her gaze forward, watching the ruins slide past. Her breath fogged the inside of her visor slightly, even with the thermal sink. Eventually, they reached a shallow canyon carved into the far side of the dead ridge network. Nestled between two collapsed towers was the entrance to the old Alliance relay station, a bunker buried under 15 feet of alloy plating and hard stone. Its only marking was a half-erased number, 42A. Caleb guided the sled to the entry slot. The ground buckled slightly as the hatch hissed open. Rested servos groaned in protest as they lowered into the underground bay. The interior lit with dull amber strips, emergency lighting, just enough to see. Tali stepped off the sled and glanced around, eyes tracing the walls, the corners, the height of the ceiling. Everything about her said recon, not paranoia. Readiness. You've done this before, she said softly. More times than I care to count. She paused. Thank you. He didn't turn, just started unloading gear. For what? He asked. For not asking me to repay you. He moved past her, his tone even. Didn't say you don't owe me. I just haven't figured out what I want yet. She raised an eyebrow. You planning to trade me for credits later? If I was, I'd be a lot nicer to you. Her lip twitched, almost a smirk, but she didn't argue. And for the first time since she fell from the sky, she didn't look like she was preparing to die. The next few hours passed in the rhythm of survival. Caleb moved through the bunker like someone rebuilding muscle memory, rebooting filtration, stabilizing power, restoring backup heat lines. He rechecked perimeter monitors, scrubbed the local node of passive signal residue, and resynced the atmospheric suppressors. Tali paced, not aimlessly. She watched, listened, observed. She wasn't fragile anymore. The healing had begun to show. Her steps were stronger, her movements more fluid. She wore the thermal cloak like a soldier out of uniform, functional, not comfortable. Her presence had weight now, focus, purpose, but she was still on edge. They'll trace the pod's beacon, she said at one point, her voice breaking the ambient hum. I wiped the ID, Caleb replied. They'll follow the flare trail down to the valley. I scrubbed most of it, and the rain helped. Not enough, she murmured. They're not freelancers, not pirates, not mercs. They're clean, funded, trained, governmental. He studied her. You know who they are? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, tell me. She didn't move toward him, just stood where she was, but her voice came steady. The Valari directive. What's left of it? They still have recovery units, ghost squads. They don't admit it, but they exist. They track down hybrids like me. For reintegration? No, she said. For deletion. Caleb frowned. They erase you? They call it population control. They don't want us rescued. They want us vanished. Quiet, without report. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. You sound like someone who used to work for them. I didn't have a choice. I was born in one of their labs, raised on simulations, combat, tactics, loyalty, conditioning. If we failed a threshold, we were repurposed. Or burned. How many like you? She looked away. I don't know. Maybe dozens, maybe hundreds. But we were never meant to last. We were made to serve until our expiration date. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't break. And that, more than anything, chilled him. How old are you now? 28. He let the silence sit between them. It said more than any question. Then he asked, if you were raised to die, why fight so hard to live? Her answer came after a long, slow breath. Because the first time someone looked at me and didn't see a weapon, I realized I wanted to be more than what I was built for. Caleb couldn't speak. He didn't have words for that. Instead, he crossed to the armory rack, pulled down a sidearm and a charge pack, and walked over. He offered them to her. She took them without question. Her hands moved with precision, checking the slide, weighing the barrel, testing the trigger tension. Everything she did was smooth, mechanical, natural, but she hesitated before strapping it to her hip. You trust me with a weapon? I think, if you wanted to kill me, he said, you already would have. She smiled. A real one. Fair. They spent the next few hours fortifying the bunker, not because it would hold forever, but because it had to hold long enough. Caleb walked her through the secondary system's old escape hatches built into maintenance tunnels, fallback passages, disguised as drainage ducts, power shutoff levers, and chemical fuel safeties. Tali absorbed it all like she was memorizing a map to her own resurrection. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. They moved like pieces of a familiar mechanism. Separate, functional, quiet, and yet, something about the silence had changed. It wasn't avoidance now. It was proximity. Tali stood in the glow of the common area, just a metal table, 2 chairs, and a wall panel that buzzed whenever the solar relay tried and failed to stabilize. She shrugged off the cloak and unclipped her collar plate, revealing the web of scars that lined her throat, scars that shimmered faintly with traces of synthetic veins still pulsing beneath the surface. Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't look away. She rested her elbows on the table and met his eyes. You asked earlier why I was running. It wasn't just because they marked me as defective. It was because I said no. He didn't interrupt. I was ordered to eliminate a target during an op. High-value extraction gone sideways. Turns out, the courier was a child, half human, rebel aligned by proximity. They said she was contaminated, told me to burn the node. No witnesses. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes lost focus for a second. I couldn't do it. I disobeyed. I got the kid out, but the directive. They don't forgive disobedience. She looked at him again. No fire in her voice, just gravity. That's when they stripped my ID, branded me unstable, shipped me off to be repackaged or recycled, or sold. Caleb stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. You made the right call. Her eyes widened slightly. That's the first time anyone said that, she whispered. He stood, moved to the main console, and checked the atmospheric scan. 1 ship in orbit. NOID, short bursts. Masked signature. They'll be here by tomorrow, he said. Tali stood, slow and steady. Her stance was strong now, balanced. I know. You don't have to run anymore. She looked at him, held his gaze. Then neither do you. That night, they didn't speak much. They sat in the bunker's dark common space, each watching the glow panels flicker. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was full, lived in. When the storm hit again, howling above in rolling bursts, neither of them flinched. The next morning came with a tremor. A low rumble rolled through the walls like thunder from beneath. The lights stuttered, power rerouted to shield reinforcement. Aerial drones shrieked warnings. One failed to return its last signal, burned out mid-flight. Caleb didn't need confirmation. They're here. Tali was already suited. Cloak off, boots laced, gear tight. She had one sidearm and a plasma knife clean, sharpened by her own hand the night before. Her voice was calm, focused. They landed northeast, near the wreck. Half moon sweep. 3 forward. 4 behind. 1 command. Signal directing the hunt. Caleb loaded his rifle, checked fusion levels. You sure? I used to run ops like this. They'll scan for heat sigs? Yes, but this station's buried under basalt. That buys us 6, maybe 7 hours. Then we don't wait here. They moved like a 2-person fire team, each step purposeful, each breath measured. Caleb packed only what was essential: med supplies, ammo caches, a portable water unit, scrambler, and a coded signal torch. Tali secured the fallback tunnel and planted decoy beacons along the outer exit. Neither of them needed orders. They worked like they'd trained together for years. And still, beneath all that, was something else. Every look carried weight, every motion trust. When they sealed the bunker's final hatch, Caleb turned to her. You could still run. Head west. There's a transmitter I could set to auto-ping. Burst relay. You jump while I draw them off. She stared at him, jaw tight. I'm not leaving you behind. You don't owe me, I choose to stay. He blinked. The simplicity of it struck harder than any speech. This wasn't loyalty. It was something more honest, more human. He swallowed the lump in his throat and met her eyes. You should know this won't end well. At best, we get away. Worst case, they burn everything, she said, completing the thought. She stepped closer, voice lower now. Personal. You gave me time to heal, gave me breath, Gave me silence. You didn't use me. Didn't ask why. I was worth saving. I didn't need a reason. That's what makes you different. She stopped, now just inches away. Her breath touched his collar. I want something before we go. Caleb tensed. What? She reached forward slowly, her palm pressed gently to his chest over his heart. I want to remember what it feels like to be seen, not as a tool, not as an asset, but as a person. I want to feel human. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand over hers. You already are. They didn't kiss immediately. There was no rush, no hunger, just presence. When she leaned in, it was soft, steady, a connection, not an act. When their lips touched, it wasn't about desire. It was about acknowledgement, a moment carved in defiance of every version of themselves that had been weaponized, broken, or discarded. Her body trembled beneath his hands, not in fear, but in wonder. She let herself be held, not possessed, not claimed, just held. The storm outside roared like judgment, but inside, there was only peace. The storm hit just before dawn. It didn't howl like the others. It growled low, primal, wrong. The kind of sound that wasn't just weather. It was war. Caleb was already awake when the tremor struck. He sat on the edge of the cot, tightening the strap on his shoulder brace, while the lights above flickered in a nervous rhythm. Power auto rerouted to the bunker's reinforcement shielding. Static filled the emergency channels. The air grew colder. Outside, the sky cracked in two as a drop craft screamed across the upper atmosphere. No lights, no broadcast signal. A tactical streak of fire and metal. He didn't need to check. They were here. In the central chamber, Tali was already suited and moving. No panic, just velocity. She strapped her knife to her thigh, secured her sidearm under her cloak, and tied her hair back in a way that exposed the pale ridges of her hybrid veins. Landfall northeast, she said calmly, close to the flare site. They'll start. Wide recon pattern sweep. 3 front line, 4 rear guard, 1 central node directing fire. Caleb armed his rifle and shouldered a charge pack. You're sure? I ran these ops, she replied. I used to be one of them. They'll look for heat signatures. Standard pattern. But this place is shielded by basalt. We've got a window. Maybe 6 hours. Maybe less. He nodded. Then we make them waste it. They didn't speak again for a while. They just moved efficient, methodical, practiced. Caleb prepped the fallback gear and secured the tunnel beacon. Tali double-checked every seal, every path, every exit. But the silence between them buzzed now. Not just tactical. Charged. When the last latch sealed and the emergency decoy signal blinked to life, Caleb turned to her one final time before departure. You don't have to do this. She faced him fully. I want to. His voice dropped. If we split up, they follow the heat trace, then we don't split, she said. He blinked. I choose this, she added. Not out of fear, not out of debt, but because for once, I'm not surviving for someone else's purpose. I'm choosing mine. Her voice hit like thunder wrapped in calm. Then, softer, and if we die here, then at least I'll die as myself. Caleb looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. No armor, no walls, no code words, just her. Then we do it together. They exited into the tunnels. The wind howled through the chasms above them, carrying the engine roar of incoming dropcraft. The sky wept soot and pressure. Ash spiraled across the canyon's rim like a shroud unraveling. When the enemy landed, they came fast, precise, drop thrusters ignited, spraying molten rock as 6 black armored figures hit the ground in a synchronized fan formation. 2 moved up the ridge, 1 flanked left, another down the valley wall. 1 drone soared above, scanning for surface anomalies. No call signs, no orders spoken aloud. They were silent, surgical, executioners in armor. Caleb and Tali crouched behind a jagged boulder in the canyon mouth. His rifle braced against a ledge, her pistol tucked against her chest. She stared at the incoming shapes like they were old nightmares returned for collection. They're forcing us into the open, she whispered. Classic push pattern. Funnel. Tactics. Caleb adjusted his scope. To scouts. 1 drone. Upper ridge. You take left? She nodded. To bursts. Drop quiet. They split like smoke. He steadied his breath. Watched the lead scout creep across the slope with too much confidence. 1 clean shot cracked through the canyon. Rail round through the helmet. Body fell without sound. Tali moved like a shadow. No hesitation. She slid up a gravel incline, pivoted behind a rock spine, and caught the second scout with a knife to the throat before he could speak. The drone swept low, sensors blinking. She vaulted onto a ledge, jammed her blade into its optic array, and let it crash beside her like a discarded toy. They regrouped at the lower pass. How many left? Caleb asked. 4, Tali said. Commanders always last. He gave her a look. How do you know that? She didn't flinch. Because I used to wait where he waits. Caleb didn't have time to respond. Movement shimmered on the high ridge, a flicker in the dust. Active commo, a sniper unit watching them. He raised his rifle to late. No angle. Tali reached for a charge grenade. Caleb stopped her with a touch. No. It'll give us away. She locked eyes with him. Then we draw them closer. They moved into the ravine, deliberately exposed, tactical. A show, a trap. They ducked behind a few small rocks, just enough cover to bait a response. It worked. 2 more enforcers dropped in one heavy unit with a shielded chest plate. 1. Agile with double blades. The heavy opened fire immediately. Kinetic rounds shredded the rock behind them, sending debris everywhere. Tali rolled forward, drawing fire, and clipped the agile unit across the leg. Caleb braced and took a high-velocity shot straight into the heavy's visor slit. One and done. The big man dropped. The agile one turned on Tali, blades flashing, and froze. The voice that came through the helmet was distorted. Deep, familiar. You're still breathing. She stood tall. Not for long if you don't back off. They don't want you back, the voice said. They want you erased. She stepped forward. Then come do it yourself. He hesitated. She didn't. 2 shots center chest. He fell, still convulsing. Caleb stared. That wasn't rage, he said. No, Tali replied. That was mercy. She looked down at the body, a flicker of regret passing her face. I knew him. We trained together. Before they broke us. Then a new sound. Heavier. Caleb turned. The commander. He descended with airy calm. No rush. No weapon raised. His armor was different, sleek, polished, silver trimmed in black. Exo class. Augmented. His helmet was off. His skin was pale gray. Eyes cold. Not Valari. Not human. Something else. A splice perfected in a lab. Hybrid 717R, he said. You're in violation of your deactivation order. Tali stepped between him and Caleb. You're not taking him. The commander raised an eyebrow. And you human, he said to Caleb. Did she offer you loyalty? A body? A lie? Tali's voice came like a blade. He offered me dignity. Something you never understood. The commander's smile cracked. She's not yours, human. She's a product. She's not yours either, Caleb growled. She decides who she is. And just like that, the calm broke. The commander lunged. He moved like lightning, silent, brutal, efficient. The commander's fist slammed into Caleb's chest before he could even fire. The blow knocked the breath from his lungs, sent him flying backwards into the canyon wall with enough force to crack stone. The rifle skidded from his grip and landed meters away. Caleb hit the ground hard, groaned. Everything inside him felt rattled. Tali didn't hesitate. She was already moving, closing the gap, blade drawn. Her movements were a symphony of precision and rage, but the commander was faster. His exo-augmented reflexes turned her first strike aside. Her second caught him in the shoulder, drawing synth blood, but he retaliated with a backhand that sent her spinning into the dirt. She recovered fast, but the damage was done. One of her ribs cracked audibly. Her breath hitched. The commander advanced, face expressionless. You disappoint me, 717R, he said. I watched you being built. I trained your cohort. I believed you were the model that would finally hold. Tali stood, wobbled, held. I held longer than you ever deserved, she growled. He lunged again. She ducked under the punch, rolled, slashed across his side. Sparks flew as her blade met reinforced plating. He grunted, more annoyed than injured, but then something changed. She stopped retreating. She didn't fall back into defensive stances, didn't try to run. She stepped forward. Into him. Not like a soldier, like something greater. She struck again, and again, fast, relentless, a flurry of attacks that left shallow cuts and deep insult. You made me to obey, she said between strikes, but I learned how to feel. The commander blocked the last hit and caught her wrist. You learned weakness, she smiled through bloodied teeth. I learned choice. He raised his gauntlet to crush her throat, his final strike. And that's when Caleb returned. From behind, staggering, breath ragged, pain flaring in every nerve but alive, he drove the shock tool into the commander's neck, point blank. The discharge screamed through the exo-rig, arcing up through neural ports and into the spine. The commander convulsed violently, eyes wide with fury, with betrayal, with something almost like fear before collapsing. Still, twitchless, done. For a moment, the canyon was silent. Caleb dropped to his knees beside Tali. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Then she looked at him, split lip, one eye bruised, breathing like every inhale was a gamble, and nodded once. I feel. She paused. The word didn't come easy. Real. Then she collapsed into him. Not from weakness, from release. She didn't need to be held. She wanted it, and that changed everything. They limped back to the shelter before dawn, following the tunnels in silence. No more alarms, no more drones, no more pursuit. The kill team hadn't just failed. They'd underestimated something deeper than strength. They'd underestimated what happened when people stopped surviving and started choosing. 2 days passed. No signals came. No reinforcements. No scans. Whatever system had sent the commander either assumed success or no longer cared. Either way, they were alone again. Only this time, it didn't feel like exile. It felt like freedom. Caleb stood outside the bunker's hatch, visor pulled up, breathing real air. The clouds had broken, not fully, but enough. A faint wash of blue-gray light spread across the ridges. No ashfall, just wind. Behind him, Tali emerged, slower now, but no longer limping. Her new armor gleamed dully in the half-light, scavenged. Parts reformed to fit her, not as a weapon, but as a person who knew what protection meant. Sleek, balanced. Hers. You're limping less, Caleb said, cracked ribs healing. You sure it's not just stubbornness? She looked at him. I was made to break before 30. I'm alive at 28. That already makes me a failure by their standards. Caleb smiled. That makes you a miracle by mine. They stood together in the soft wind, watching it sweep across a world that no longer held power over them. Then Tali spoke, her voice quieter than usual. Do you think it's over? Caleb shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they'll come again, but they'll think twice, and we won't be here when they do. She nodded. A pause. Where would you go? He thought for a long moment, then smiled faintly. There's a half-dead orbital station near the Tresari belt. No laws, no orders, just dust, miners, old stories, and a guy who owes me docking fees. She raised an eyebrow. That your way of asking if I'll come with you? He looked at her. No, that's me being terrible at asking. She laughed. The sound was rough but free. I'll come, she said, but not because I owe you. I didn't think you would. I'll come, she added, because I want to figure out who I am when I'm not running. Caleb nodded. We'll figure it out. They spent the day packing. She insisted on handling the weapons cache. He let her. They left the bunker in the evening, their sled loaded with silence, hope, and a second chance neither of them had planned for. They sat on the ridge above the canyon, one last time, watching the stars reappear one by one. Tali leaned back on her hands. Do you regret it? He looked over. Bringing you back? No, letting me in. He didn't answer immediately, then softly. Want the honest version? Always. I was already done before you landed. Just hadn't said it out loud yet. You kicked something back to life. She tilted her head. So I saved you too? I'd say we're even. They didn't need more words after that. The next morning, they left Virex's -9.no explosions. No pursuit. Just a beat-up transport engine sputtering into the void. They didn't look back. They didn't need to, because for the first time in either of their lives, the future wasn't a sentence. It was a choice, and they were choosing it together.